Welcome to Get Used to It. I'm Malcolm Boyd, your host, and I'm an author and an activist and an Episcopal priest at St. Augustine by the Sea Episcopal Church in Santa Monica. And with me today are three wonderful people. Rabbi Denise Eger from Reformed Judaism Congregation of Kol Ami, the Reverend Freida Brown from Selah Community Church, and the Reverend Jose Marco Gonzalez from Metropolitan Community Church of Los Angeles. We're all gays and lesbians, and we're all in the church. We're all in religion and spirituality. And to some people, that's like oil and water. There's woundedness, there's pain, misunderstanding. Where are we with all of that? Let's get into that for a minute. Freida, where are you as a gay and a lesbian in terms of the church and religion?
You know, Malcolm, I think today it's very clear to me that I'm okay in terms of my service to God in the church. I served the United Methodist Church for 14 years.
14 years?
14 years in the closet as a pastor, college minister, and counselor. And enjoyed my service to God, but always knew that there was something missing in my own personal life, my own ability to be whole. And it had to do with, of course, self-acceptance. And of course, after a while, 1989, I came out of the closet and decided to go independent as a pastor.
What happened to you when you came out of the closet?
Oh, wonderful things, and yet very personal, striving things. Wonderful things, meaning that I was not ostracized by those I came out of the closet to. They had known me for years as a worker and had accepted me as an individual first, and I think that made my journey a bit easier. And in fact, my church was very, very good to me and very much welcomed me to stay and be who I was, and I was very appreciative of that. Also, the new community that I was en route to serve was a very wholesome community already in ministry to the gay and lesbian community. So as an individual, I have found a very good place to be and to rest, and that is because the service of humanity, the service of God, has not been hindered or shortened by taking that decision and to go forth with God in a new arena.
Well, Jose, you're from Chile.
Yeah.
What was your experience? Did you come out at a point? And
yeah, it's very difficult to come out in Chile for social situation and everything, and it's for the family too. But I was for 6 years in the Catholic seminary, and it was a big decision for me to come out to my superior. And I said,
did you?
Yeah, I do. And I said, I went to a retreat for a month, so to think about it. But I said, you know, Enrique was my superior. I said, Enrique, I think I love God, I love the church, I love the people we serve, but I'm gay. So is any problem with that? I said, yes, it's a problem. So I said, okay, bye-bye. And then was to come out with my family, you know, because all your family, especially my family, is very Catholic. So no, it was like, we want to have a son who is a priest. You know? So I tried to explain to my mother about this and said, you know, what? Give me a reason. My mother said, I think I'm gay. I said, what is that?
What is that?
What is that? I said, okay, I'm homosexual. And she looked at me. I think that was a precious moment of love, and she said, I knew it. So, but I want to give you a time to you tell me that. And my father wasn't very happy, but I feel my mother's support. And that was very important for me. And then I feel all the acceptance of my brothers and sisters. I have big family.
What happened to you religiously then? In other words, the Catholic was over.
I continued to meet with other people, Christian people from different denominations. So we started a group called Gay Christian Reflection, something like that. And then I knew about MCC. So I was the founder of MCC in Chile, and I was new and some kind of clandestinity.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting. So sometimes we meet in this place, then we meet another place. But that was very nice to put Jehovah's Witness and Evangelical Methodist, Mormons together in this group, and was a great experience for me.
Well, Denise, what has been your experience as a lesbian in Judaism?
Well, for me, my spirituality, my Jewishness was always so much a part of my family life and growing up. And my decision to become a rabbi was really based on the wonderful, positive, loving experience that I found in the Jewish community and the support. And as I struggled through my adolescence, early and late adolescence, with my sexuality, there was a part of me that said, oh, you can't be a religious person and also be a lesbian. And I struggled with it, because I so wanted to serve my community, to share the wonderful richness of Jewish tradition and history and social action, social justice issues that's so much a part of Reform Judaism. And as I grew to accept myself and love myself more, and had my family support, I was really able to take those steps towards the, becoming a rabbi, and understanding that as a lesbian, I didn't have to deny myself my spirituality, which is what they all want you to believe, that we have to deny our spirit, our religious feelings. And I think that's been the avenue for me to continue my work in the gay and lesbian community here for so many years, is that we can really tap into what is, I think, our gay and lesbian spirit, our religious heritages and our traditions, and not deny that. And our love of self is a reflection of our love of God. And so that's kind of propelled me in my work, and coming to know that it doesn't have to be oil and water, maybe oil and vinegar in that sense, and then you shake it up and you make a fabulous dressing.
I had an experience in my life as a priest and as a writer. It seemed to me that it was essential to come out, because if I'm counseling other people, I don't want to be phony with them. And as a writer also, it's very difficult, because that's very vulnerable and very sensitive. And so I didn't know what would happen. I was rather well known at that time and had written a number of books, and when I came out, some of the books were burned, and there was a reaction. I was unemployable in the church for a while, and went through a real wilderness experience. It was very painful. And then, but I never doubted the love of God or my own dignity as a human being. And then St. Augustine by the Sea invited me. Took some courage. I think after the first sermon, $20,000 or $30,000 was canceled in pledges. Some people left, but the church was prepared to absorb that. And basically, there was one couple who prayed in their house for 36 hours, and they were in great pain. But then their prayer led them to love me and accept. So we made it, and we've all had such different experiences. Now you're a rabbi at Kolami, so you're spreading the word, you're helping people, you're witnessing to what happened in your own life, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the synagogue that we're building here in West Hollywood is really a reflection of that sense of wholeness that we've all kind of spoken about and alluded to, that we can be proud of who we are, we can love ourselves, serve the community, serve God, and in our congregation we invite our straight and bisexual family and friends to be with us. We don't live in just a gay and lesbian ghetto. We live in a community of the world in a larger sense, and so we want to create that opportunity for interaction and hope, and I think that's a very important concept.
What is the Selah Community Church, Freida, and your place in it?
Okay. I'm the founder of the Sailor Community Churches, and it's a church, community church, and its main interest is to, of course, build on behalf of God the lives of gay men and women. We have two church segments, one in Los Angeles and one in the Long Beach community. The Sailor Community Churches started as a result of my desire to come out and build something unique by way people could build a sense of family who did not have a sense of family. Malcolm, I'm also a school teacher and a writer, and part of the independent edge that I feel now in terms of ministry is producing me also some of the opportunities to write on subjects I had not had the opportunity to do before. So one of the books I'm writing right now is entitled The Lesbian Woman and Spirituality, particularly from the African American woman's perspective. And I'm enjoying.
So important.
It's very important because religion has always been a vital part of the African American experience. Even throughout slavery, the faith of the African American people sustained them. And of course, being an African American lesbian woman, through some of the trials and tribulations I've had as an African American woman, it has always been my faith, whether it be an attempt to come out or whether it was an attempt to make a school classroom look like a place of learning. The faith, my faith, has always played a big role in my life. And so certainly when I decided to come out of the traditional setting of religion, that was the one faith element that I called upon and asked God to now show me that I could be blessed and serve you in an out position, because that was a position that I had not taken before. I had always helped and served the gay and lesbian community, but like most gay and lesbian people who were professional, as I was, it was always a kind of get away from the regular job thing to the experience of the weekend or the experience of helping, but in the closet. But now I wanted God, as I stepped out of my full-time position as a pastor and minister of a traditional church setting, to step now into the larger arena where gay and lesbian men were now politically active, were now socially and religiously involved, that God would show me that this too would be a blessing for me. And I have so been blessed by coming out of the closet, and being the wounded healer is the concept of, that we all know from the seminary setting. And I think that nothing is more prevalent and more real than the wounded healer in terms of the gay and lesbian pastor, one who knows the journey of the experience of being within and now having to come without, challenges us to the height of our religious training.
In terms of Jungian psychology and other traditions, it's also the shaman role, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the person who has been wounded,
Yes.
who has in effect died, and has a new life and is now healing. Jose, how did you make the transformation from Chile then, where you had founded MCC, to coming here and being associate at the Metropolitan Community Church in Los Angeles?
It's been difficult to learn this culture and to focus on something. But I knew by my special ministry is with the Hispanic people here, especially in LA, and has been a wonderful experience. When you said about we are not a ghetto, we are not only gay or lesbian, some people I said, this is a gay church, and I said, no, this is church for all people.
Yes.
And sometimes we have to work so hard to make that possible. But in my ministry with the Hispanic community, I saw a lot of that. You know, we struggle with machismo in our own culture, but I have a lot of work with AIDS, visitation to the hospital or some counseling, and I'm witness of a lot of reconciliation between son and daughter and all family, and that was wonderful when the family come to the church, when brothers and sisters come to the church, and they are not gay, but they feel welcome because they has been rejected. You know, some people have said, can you come to the hospital because this priest or these people don't want to visit him, so can you please come? And that is that for me is difficult to understand, how people don't realize who is his neighbor, and how people feel very isolated, and how we can do all this, I think, this sign of reconciliation, and we can be a wonderful witness about that. And you know, I have sometimes struggled with women, how we give a place to Hispanic women at the church, because they has been so oppressed, you know, with a lot of right who has been violated. So how we give a place, how myself as a gay man, I can give a place, an opportunity to they can express his own spirituality, because it's a wonderful richness for the church.
How else do you do the Hispanic ministry within the church?
It's difficult because, you know, you have a tension here, are three different cultures. It's the American culture, it's Hispanic culture, it's Afro-American. So three group different, we do church in different way. We think the way we do our mission is very different, and sometimes we have conflict, especially with America. We have a lot of conflict. How we can accomplish, you know, this mission. I try to say we have our own traditions or our own way to celebrate our faith and express our faith. So we cannot do in your way, you know, and you can understand that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, Freida, the role of the African American church, because it was always a super role. In other words, the church had to be more than the usual Caucasian church had to be. It had to be a lot of things, didn't it?
Yes, it had to be the political gathering place. It had to be the place for educational training. It had to be the place for solid family building. And so the church has always been the nucleus of the black family life experience. And it has also been the most difficult place for the African American gay or lesbian man or woman to come out, to find a sense of acceptance. And the gay and lesbian member has always been a strong and adamant contributor, if you will, to the African American church. We have had numerous musicians, preachers, and teachers, and for years it has been the most difficult place to come out because the black church experience is also deeply rooted in an understanding of family, and the mores of the African American black family tradition is very heterosexual in terms of the role of the black woman, the role of the black man. But it's changing.
The African American and the Hispanic culture and the Caucasian, the white culture, if that's the word. They all have different approaches to homophobia. And how to deal with it. We're going to end this segment of Get Used to It Now, and we'll be back in a moment with our guests, and stick around. Join us.
At first, we didn't know what to think.
He said he was gay.
We thought we had done something.
I was so angry, so hurt.
We didn't know where to turn.
Talking to other families at Parents Flag was a lifesaver.
Now we're closer than ever.
She's the same daughter she always was.
We love him just as much as always.
Parents Flag helped us through it.
You are not alone. Talk to us. We understand. For the Parents Helpline nearest you, call 1-800-4FAMILY.
We're back with Get Used to It. And I hope you do get used to it. I'm Malcolm Boyd, your host, and Denise Eger is with me, and Freida Brown, and Jose Marco Gonzalez. Denise, as there's a feminist theology and spirituality coming out of a feminist sensibility and experience, as there's an Afro-American and a Hispanic or Latino theology and spirituality coming out of those ethnic experiences, sensibilities, and feelings. So I'm convinced there is a gay and lesbian theology and spirituality coming out of gay and lesbian sensibility and experience. But I don't think there's enough of it. I don't think we've done enough work yet, serious, hard work. This isn't glamour.
Right.
What are your feelings about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of those areas in our gay and lesbian life that we haven't paid enough detailed attention to. But I do think, as I guess I intuit, and the more I work in our community, feel that there is indeed emerging a sense of our own kind of way of being in the world, way of thinking, way of having our spiritual life unfold. taking into account all of our various ethnic and religious traditions and how that informs it as well. And I think that something we spoke about in the earlier segment may shed some light, and that is this notion of wholeness or completeness. And I really think we have to take a first hard theological look at the coming out moment, because it is that self-acknowledgement, it is that moving through the steps of coming out towards public acknowledgement.
It's an incredible spiritual experience.
It is a transformative spiritual moment, and this is an area that we all must take a much harder look at, I think, in our religious work, because that's really what does religion do? Try to give us a way to see the world and to see how God works in the world and in our lives and how we relate to that. And I think coming out is a God-blessed experience. I mean, it is for me. I mean, it's not something that God frowns upon, and God made us, created us in the divine image. And so I think that we have to really look at that coming out moment as kind of the kernel, if you will, of our theological experience.
Yes, I feel the divine image is very central to this.
Absolutely.
This is a source of our dignity, our worth, our esteem. It's interesting, some of us have struggled in mainstream settings of church, and some of us have struggled in non-mainstream, new, fresh, experimental ways to do the same thing, to worship, to have an authentic experience. And I think we struggle to not lose all the roots, to hold on to roots, and at the same time to liberate ourselves from some things that can hold us back. And I wonder, Jose, how you feel about your worship experience, where you are bringing into it the roots that come out of the Judeo-Christian culture particularly, and the new experiences and needs of gay men and lesbians who sometimes need something fresh, a new perspective. How do you feel about that? Where are you finding this?
That has been an interesting experience, because most of the congregation have kind of background Catholic. So sometimes they want a lot of Catholic thing, but I like that too, but I have to see the whole congregation. So I think that it's a moment of create new things. Catholics are used to everything, the priest do everything. So what we try to do is give a participation to the community. You know, we have to express our faith, or we have to pray together. Sometimes when people pray, put all this oppression we have inside of us out. It's some kind, for me, that's very important, like liberation theology. That is my perspective. You know, it's a theology of the oppressed. So I feel... And
we are oppressed.
We are oppressed in the sense. I feel myself, when I was in Chile, oppressed, because this is the third world for people from other worlds. But in that third world is other groups who are more oppressed, and one of the groups is a gay and lesbian group. So it's some kind of, we together have to work so hard to do way of liberation, you know. So I try to put that in myself, and don't forget, everybody who come to the church has coming with a lot of things, oppression, a lot of oppression inside. So in which way we're doing this liberation process? So I think one of that way is when we said, okay, we want women here, and give her a participation. Sometimes I invite women to preach, and that has been a wonderful experience for me to hear other women. That's it's great for me to have both of you here. You know, that teach me other things. So
gay and lesbian theology, then, in a way, is liberation theology, isn't it?
It must be. It must be a liberation theology. That's the point of what we are all doing is, we are all oppressed, and some of us 2 and 3 times, layers and layers of oppression, as Jose correctly articulates. But we have to figure out ways to throw off that oppression and to kind of free the shackles of that enslavement.
And I think to build upon the traditions of the church. You know, one of the things that
Freida,
liberation...
you have begun a church. Haven't you?
Yes.
Which is fascinating.
Yes.
Now, liberation theology is very much the basis of your work, isn't it?
Absolutely. And while I was in seminary as well, one of the things that took root for me of interest was liberation theology. And that started first as an African-American woman serving a church and a denomination where women had not necessarily, as African-American women, taken their full places in the work of God. In fact, the conference that I was ordained in as a United Methodist pastor had not had its first African-American woman ordained until I came along. So there were many doors and barriers for me to, of course, cross and go through. And so an understanding of liberation theology first started as an African-American woman, then, of course, later as an African-American lesbian woman. But I think that for the coming out experience and the liberation theology in general is more than a political experience of coming out, but it carries us to the traditions that, of course, we have to be a part of as men and women that would serve God. And for me, that's a safe place now, because I would not have wanted to throw away the traditions of the church just to be a religious gay Christian. That it was very important to me that I understood those traditions and also know that I could build upon them, which is the new air breathing through the windows of new understandings in the religious experience. And I think that James Cone, for me, the father of Black liberation theology, helped me to understand that gay liberation theology was very, very much a necessity for our own understanding of how to define ourselves, because that's the thing that, of course, liberation theology did for the church's understanding of how Black people saw themselves in the way of worship in the world in which we live, and also in terms of the oppression that we experience as African American people. So now gay liberation theology is our opportunity to express and define ourselves in the light of who we see ourselves to be, in the light of God, building upon the traditions of the church, not throwing them away at all, but to do a better job at defining them out of our own mouths rather than the mouths of the church, who took, in many instances, just a portion of "Thus saith the Lord" from the Word, and not taking a look at the very cultures out of which the church was preaching, and just being a little bit disconcerted about the whole message, and not necessarily to affect us, but perhaps not really understanding us.
It's interesting that I wouldn't probably be sitting here if it weren't for Black liberation theology.
Okay.
Because I was in the church, minding my business, doing my work, when the Civil Rights Movement stirred my conscience. And I was invited to go on a freedom ride. That's where we, Black and white together, we got on a bus in the Deep South. People were wounded, they were killed. It was very dangerous. I'm not courageous at all. I'm really quite a shy person. But I realized on that occasion that if I didn't do this, I couldn't talk about it anymore. I couldn't be real. I just had to do this. And so that, then Martin Luther King came into the scene, and he instructed us in nonviolence. He said it was like picking up a phone. I always thought this was so wonderful, his explanation of this, because the way you pick up a phone, is it nonviolent? Or is it violent? We live such violent lives. We're so angry. We're enraged. We pick up the phone in a violent way, you know? But nonviolence, in other words, then not as public relations or a technique, but a way of life.
A way of life.
And so, and this comes back to Gandhi, to Martin Luther King, it comes back to Jesus, it comes back to a lot of things. It comes back to the Hebrew Bible. We find it everywhere. So this led me then to a lot of jailings and a lot of experiences. I was with Dr. King on a number of occasions. Changed my life. And it meant that I wouldn't have advancement in the church in a way, because I had become dangerous. And that was okay.
That was okay.
And so, because of that, and there were a number of gays and lesbians I'd met in the civil rights movement, I was able to come out. So it seems to me what we've got here is linkage between our experiences where we deeply touch each other and affect each other's lives, don't we? Wouldn't you say that?
And from our Jewish perspective, so much of our theology is based on the liberation experience of moving from Egypt through the Promised Land and that wandering and hungering for the Promised Land and moving into it. And so that kind of hunger for that liberation, I think,
that
just
Promised Land.
and that Promised Land and moving in, even if you have to wander for 40 years till you find it. You know,
I think
really
that's
fuels that.
And I think that also that helped me to build in and spirituality. And can be the spirituality of the oppressed. I don't know, but in the way that I feel now, when I feel with, I feel like I'm naked when I pray, because I don't have nothing to scare. I don't have nothing to put away. You know, that is myself. It's my whole self in front of God, in the presence of God, and that is such a wonderful experience. So when I in doing this, also that every situation that I have in life come together. Every difficult moment, sometimes a struggle, sometimes people who are dying, of people who are continuing this oppressing. You see what happened in Mexico with gay and lesbian people, what happened in Brazil. Every day they kill people in Brazil, every day. So how don't bring all these things to my prayer? So that has been for me a wonderful spiritual experience.
One of the things that I focus on in some of the theological work that I've been doing is this notion of completeness, which in Hebrew we use the word shlemut, wholeness, which comes from the word shalom, for peace. But not just peace from the outside world, but as you said, this inner peace, this inner strength. And so we have that sense of relatedness that, when there's no more closets,
there's a homosia in the African American experience. It's unity.
There's a
it's
unity.
A unity of soul, a unity of experience. And it's vital. And I think that liberation theology calls us to that sense of accountability for our lives, for our religion, for what the churches or institutions that we represent say about God, because the activity of God must be questioned always when there is oppression. And I think that was the one secret of liberation theology, at least to begin the dialogue. Where is God in the sight of oppression? Where is God in the life of the closet? When persons are not whole, when persons are absolutely without the ability to be free.
When their self-esteem is so low. Yeah.
The church has always taken a sense of negativity, I feel, against pride, and yet without pride for the gay and lesbian person, there can be no wholeness.
But this is good pride, it's not hubris.
It's not, that's right, it's not hubris.
And this is another. I'd like to segue for a second, because we're talking about spirituality and theology, and one practice in which we can find gay liberation, spirituality and theology, I think, is in the gay and lesbian unions, the marriages, because this is a concrete expression. People come to us. For the last 10 years, I've done a number of these for all sorts of people, lesbians, gay men, a number of Roman Catholics, a number of other people. I've always really felt a sense of great humility in doing it, because, all they're asking for the people is a blessing.
Yes.
And the fathers and mothers, the siblings can come together. I just think it's one of the more beautiful experiences that we can have in offering something here. Do you offer that in the Sela
Yes,
church,
I do.
Freida?
Yes, I do. And I really believe in the holy unions of gay and lesbian men and women. I believe in it because we first had to live out our expressions of love in a society of oppression that in many instances denied our love, and in many instances kept us in the club, in many instances kept us with a sense of not having a public expression of our love.
And also wounded relationships terribly.
A lot of them, and certainly from the legalities and the legal rights that we deserved as human and men and women who were willing to say that I commit myself to you. So for me, it's a very important union because it denounces all of that which was our early beginning, and it also shows to us who are the first doubters of our capabilities to love and be in committed relationships where we can, of course, have the sanctions of the blessings of God and feel the blessings and the support of God Almighty. Not to mention the fact that we have some of the legal protections that would be there for us in case things didn't work out.
The nurturing. The healing.
Yes, and the church and someone that you can talk to, Malcolm.
And the support of the people you invite.
The support of the people that you invite.
To share that spiritual moment is very important. And one of the reasons I think our gay and lesbian civil rights agenda must push much harder for domestic partnerships, bills across this country, to include in the Civil Rights Bill the opportunity to make our relationships sanctioned by the state. We must find continued ways not only to make that spiritual moment, but also that legal moment.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back, and we'll continue a discussion of gay unions, which we're just getting into. So stay with us, and we'll be back in just a moment.
It would be nice if latex condoms were automatic. But since they're not, using them should be. Simply because a latex condom used consistently and correctly will prevent the spread of HIV.
Get used to it. That's what we're doing. I'm Malcolm Boyd, and we're back with Denise and Freida and Jose. We're discussing gay and lesbian unions and marriages. And I think, Denise, you said you had something on symbols you wanted to say about the...
I think this is something that we ought to be doing more and more, and celebrating our commitments and our love for our partner. And one of the things that I've been working very much with is a Jewish wedding ceremony for the couples that I work with. And I've done hundreds of gay and lesbian ceremonies over the last almost 8 years now in our community. And really working with the old Jewish symbols, like the wedding canopy.
Oh, this is roots, isn't it?
This is roots.
Yeah.
And the ketubah, which is the Jewish wedding document. But now taking those symbols and renewing them for our own gay and lesbian lives and community, so that we feel a sense of authenticity to our roots, on the one hand, and our culture, and yet on the other hand, we're not imitating anything that perhaps may be heterosexist inherently in it. And the best example that I just quickly want to share with you, in the end of a Jewish wedding, they break a glass. There's lots of interpretations to chase away the evil spirits, to remember sad times in the midst of joy. But in our gay and lesbian ceremonies, what I do is have both partners in the union break a glass, an egalitarian statement, and we reinterpret it in terms of the partnership and the initial act of shattering and of creation that the mystics understand, so that their union begins a partnership with themselves, with God, with their community.
Absolutely.
And so that an old symbol renewed, given new life.
It's a wonderful idea.
And I think that's more than what we have to do in all of our ritual lives, is do that with a particular gay and lesbian understanding about them.
I just was reading a ritual from England. You reminded me of it, and it's about the end of a relationship.
Yes.
And how we need to ritualize that and help people face it, deal with it, be able to get on with their lives. And in that instance, there's a breaking.
Yes, and I do ceremonies.
Which helps. You do that too.
I've done it, and the document that we use and we write and the couple makes their commitments and vows in that document. I've used in separation ceremonies where the document's ripped or cut in some way to symbolize the tearing apart of this holy relationship.
The facing of it.
Yes, and it really helps to end and to finalize and to heal, which is very important.
And I think,
Freida, where are you with this?
I'm all for it, but I'm particularly want to applaud your work there, because I think in the gay and lesbian community, when there is a separation of couples, there's a deeper sense of pain felt by us because we are so oppressed in the society in which we live, so that when we lose a family member in this context, we feel the loss in a greater sense of the way, because it becomes our friend, our family member, our supporter, and the like. And so it's a strong need to have that support then too. But back to the union itself. I've been in the union for 2.5 years now, and my spouse and I have been in a committed relationship. And one of the things I have learned about it in terms of the religious edge, and I challenge persons to bring their experiences of love to a union, is that it brings out your capacity to your roots, your religious roots. That is, it allows you the opportunity to see God challenge you to pray, and to see God challenge you to remember the things that you were taught in your family experience, especially if you had a strong religious rootage in which you were given the opportunity to be taught about love and sharing, giving and taking. And the union reminds you that you're under an umbrella of support, that you're not alone, that when times get tough, when you don't know exactly what to do, that you do have the resources of prayer, that you do have the resources of a counselor or a pastor or a supportive community. If you don't bring it to that, of course you have your friendship community, but there's something about knowing that you have the strong, loving presence of God in your relationship, and it has something to say about it in terms of those persons around you too who believe in God. The heterosexuals who may be your support systems can honor your union too, no matter what the world thinks about it.
I've been in a relationship for about 8 years now. That is kind of the central thing in my life, and I'm so grateful for it. What a gift. It's I think it helps you so much to live with or compromise. It isn't just one person here having, you don't play God in a bad sense, do you? In other words, it's love. And it means always opening up your life.
Being vulnerable.
And being vulnerable, which is so important. Jose, what about the unions at the Metropolitan Community Church that you do?
I have my experience in that sense too. It's the way people commit each other and how we can bless this love, because it's really a commitment. But in this Hispanic eyes, one of the things I discovered was for people, all these things are very important. So put them together and do a ritual is, for the family is important. And I have two experiences when people, we hold a union, but they said, can you go to our house and bless the house? It's some kind of, they feel the presence of God in that commitment, but also they want to bring that to the house. So they ask for that. And I have a wonderful experience, also in the way we prepare that. We usually have 3 sessions with people when we talk what this means for them, and also what they mean for the whole community. Because you are some kind of testimony. You are giving a testimony. I went to one of our general conference, and Troy Perry said, if any couple who have here 50 years together, and one couple raised up, and it was wonderful for me. I said, "Oh my God," But it was beautiful to see all these people. They spend 50 years together, and they are celebrating love every day. It's not.
We can do it.
That was
we can do it, and we need more role models in this area.
I think so.
And I think that it's we're getting more, and I think the church is playing a vital role in providing it for us. And I'm very, very happy that we are, because I was always the marrying type, always the kind of marrying type. And my spouse and I are very happy, and I thank God for her. Her name is Catherine White, and I just want to say that. But I think that we need the role models, because there are a number of single persons that have just not seen the compromising and the sharing and the giving and taking.
No, I agree with you. My partner, my lover, and I, it's funny, we get, his name is Mark Thompson, and we get male Malcolm Thompson, Mark Boyd, or
they've confused.
Malcolm Boyd Thompson. Or, it's nice.
It's a whole new family.
It's a new family.
Right.
Well, the point is, it is a new family, which brings us to the religious right, which claims to have family values, and who claims that we do not. And here we are just talking about our family values, our extended family.
Well, see, I keep wondering is why they get to define
well, they don't.
What that is. They'd like to think they do.
They'd like to think they do.
And sometimes in our own queer community, we let them define it instead of taking the queer offensive, as it were. And
well, Denise, isn't one of the problems that when we, in a queer way, make the mistake of throwing out God and giving morality and God to the religious right? Isn't this the worst thing to do, not just morally and politically, but personally?
Absolutely, because we lose a sense of self in that. You know, if we see ourselves as a reflection of the divine, including the gay and lesbian being, then to throw that out and to accede that only to the radical right, I don't even want to call them a religious, but the radical right, we do not do ourselves any service in that way.
No, nor can we simply hate. We've got to have a program. We have to win. And you win by nonviolence, and you win by love.
And by knowledge.
And knowledge. That was my point, Denise.
Knowledge?
I think
you both agree, Denise and Freida, on knowledge.
We have to be knowledgeable of we have to be knowledgeable of what is being said about us, the rootage of which it comes, and also the interpretations of what it was meant to be in order to interpret our own lives. So I advocate for education in religion. I advocate for the persons who are of the religious right to come to the tables and be held accountable for what they say, particularly in the African American religious experience, particularly in the African American church experience, because African Americans have not challenged that area of the religious experience of African American gay and lesbian men and women, and a lot has been said to keep us in the closet. And I think that the World Church Council is a good place to use an example. For years, you know, the World Church Council has called a dialogue, if you will, among the church leaders, among the educated church leaders, if you will, to say, let's see what's the text, what does the text really say, what's behind the text. And that's one of the areas that I'm a real adamant believer that we have not done enough work. Knowledge and education, what does the Bible really say? And let us come together. We are graduates now of the same theological seminaries. We are graduates now of the same religious experiences. How is it we come out with saying so many different things on one particular context? And how is it we can allow ourselves to say the things that have been said if we're scholars of the Bible?
A friend of ours, Nancy Wilson, the Reverend Nancy Wilson from the MCC, is writing a book called Outing the Bible.
And it must be required reading in the gay and lesbian community.
I think so.
Because our own people do not know the Bible. You cannot fight that radical right.
We've got to know the Bible.
We've got to talk their language in some way, and we've got to know it so that we can...
We've got to say it's our language.
Yes, we've got to make it...
It's not their language.
Right, and we've got to make it our own.
Denise and I shared an experience that was interesting with the Reverend Nancy Wilson, incidentally. Why don't you tell about that? Because, in other words, we were responding to the religious right by doing that,
we were. Several years ago here in Los Angeles, the county was holding back funds for AIDS funding. And we went before the County Board of Supervisors.
On their Tuesday morning meeting.
Regular session. And I had just been there a few weeks ago previous to that to deliver the invocation. But we stood before them and disrupted their meeting in a nonviolent way through singing. And
we sang "We Are a Gentle, Loving People," and we prayed, and we were arrested.
And we were arrested.
And we were dragged from the chamber. and incarcerated for...
with lots of big deputy sheriffs and gloves and masks, as if you know, we were all falling over ill.
Well, I was chained to somebody else and chained to a bench for 10 hours, which I thought was cruel and unusual punishment for my constitutional right to go before this body of the government and ask for support.
It was not a fun experience.
And then the Los Angeles Times did a very stupid thing. In reporting it, they said that 5 or 6 people, the number that we were, had been dressed as clergy.
When all of us were.
And we were
clergy.
And you know, ordained in our various churches and denominations. And this is the kind of spin that the religious right wants to give to our communities, that we're not authentic, that we that our issues are not real issues, such as AIDS funding.
That we're playing at it, that we're not real. This is the image they try to create.
The worst for me, not to cut you off, Matt, the worst for me is that we are abominable creatures. Again, that's an old term still used to define who we are.
And one they don't even really know, because they haven't looked at the Hebrew, which is where that King James Version got translated from Greek, not looking at the Hebrew, and that the word abomination in the Hebrew text means a blasphemy, because they're really talking about a way to worship God.
Yes.
And in those days, they worshiped God through all kinds of sects, the gods and goddesses of the ancient Near East.
The Book and Bible Society was in 1900 published a book called The Negro a Beast.
Yes.
And it said that African Americans, that black people didn't possess souls and consequently couldn't be baptized. It's this background that we need to expose in the religious right, their intolerance, their blasphemy, because to say that is blasphemous.
It's blasphemous. Was always then, but it took the courage of the African American religious being to define God for self, to know God for self, to know where God had been working in his or her life, to come forward and say, this is where God is in my life. And I think that's the same challenge that's before us, because there will always be a body of people, and particularly the religious right, to define what God thinks of us, when indeed we know what God thinks of us by the very fact that we got up this morning, by the very reason that we're allowed to sit here and to talk and to see each other's smiles, tells us what God thinks about us. You see.
I think that is important what you said about education, but also what I saw sometimes, I think we have, as a gay and lesbian Christian community, be more united. Sometimes we're so separate. You know, we don't spend too much time together to talk about our issues. What we do sometimes is we put together our background, our church. And that is important, but I think most important is our prophetic mission. And one of prophetic mission right now is to confront these people. Because they are doing no good work. They are hurting people, you know, that harass people. You know, some people go to church very scared what those people said, or what my mother said, influenced when they hear all these programs. So I think we have to work more in that.
And we also need to respect each other in the gay and lesbian community more, in terms of coming from different points of view and places, and realizing that we have an enormous job to do of self-realization and of peace in terms of living with the religious right, which is a very flagrant, virulent enemy that isn't playing games at all. Thank you so much for being here today. Our time is drawing to a conclusion. Rabbi Denise Eger, Reverend Freida Brown, Reverend Jose Marco Gonzalez from Selah Community Church, Congregation Kol Ami, and the Metropolitan Community Church. I'm Malcolm Boyd from St. Augustine by the Sea in Santa Monica. And, well, we're getting used to it.